or YouTube. You can find it on the Death Penalty Action channels, and please share it. And we'll be
What I would like to do today is to invite the governor and commend her because she said all life is sacred. We go for that.
Yes.
All life is sacred. Hopefully she's listening, and hopefully she will have the courage to really believe it.
What we're trying to abolish is hate.
Yes.
What we're trying to abolish is this dehumanizing practice.
Yes.
You can't stop murder with murder. You can't stop stealing with stealing. You can't stop rape with rape. It seems so obvious, but it don't seem that obvious to the folks that inhabit this building.
As a civilized society, we have got to do better. And how can you sit there and watch a human being die? It's ultimate torture.
We are bringing back a very ancient method of execution that was used in the 1940s. This is not okay. We are not restored by killing another human being.
According to the UN Human Rights Office, this method of execution could amount to torture. So we stand here today asking Governor Ivey to help a last-minute change of heart and do the right thing and halt this execution.
Hey, Esther. Is that you, Esther?
No, that's not Esther, Gary.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hello,
It's
hello,
okay.
everybody.
all right, Gary. Here we are. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. My name is Abe Bonowitz with Death Penalty Action, and this is the February 2024 edition of the forecast. We're going to look at everything that's coming up in terms of executions, and we're also going to talk a little bit about some of what's happening in some of the states. The video we just watched, of course, was one that we put together based on speeches that were made in a rally prior to the last execution in Alabama, the execution of Kenny Smith. We're going to talk a little bit about that too, in the context of some of what's happening in a variety of states where they're looking at new methods, or not new, but different, increasing the numbers of methods of executions possible in those various states. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But first, want to give our panel just a quick opportunity to introduce themselves, and other people will be joining us too. So we're just going to be looking at this point for just a quick name, where you're from, what organization you represent. And we're not going to get into more just yet, but just to let people know who's here and others will be joining us. So let me just remove the spotlight here. And Allie, why don't you start? I'm going to just go across the screen as I see it.
Hi all, I'm Allie Sullivan with Death Penalty Action. I'm the communications coordinator, and I'm glad to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you. Donna?
Hi, I'm Donna Bowe from Idaho, and my husband and I are friends of Tom Creech.
Great, thank you. Christy?
I'm Christy Hargesheimer from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I represent Amnesty International. I'm the state death penalty abolition coordinator, and I'm also the convection for alternatives to the death penalty.
That's great. Thank you. Jeff?
I'm Jeff Hood.
No further introduction is necessary. Reverend Gary Drinkard.
I'm not Reverend Gary Drinkard, exonerated death row survivor from Alabama on the board of directors of Witness Tennessee.
That's great. Thank you. And I wasn't expecting to see you here, Mitzi, but you're welcome to be here. Mitzi Magleby from Mississippi. You want to introduce yourself a little further?
I wasn't expected to be on the panel, but here it just shot me right in.
I think you must be using the link from the last time when you were on, but it's fine.
I guess I don't know what happened. Mitzi Magleby, Mississippi. I run Hooked on Justice Mississippi and starting Leaders for Life to abolish the death penalty in Mississippi.
All right, well, that's great. Maybe we'll have you talk a little bit more about that too, and also maybe join the discussion since Mississippi is one of those states where the gas chamber is also a possibility. But what we do with this program, we're just here to talk a little bit about the upcoming executions. So let me just go ahead and start with another screen share here, just to get everybody set on where you can find the additional information. And of course, Allie, maybe you can put some of the links into the chat. But this is the webpage at deathpenaltyaction.org. And here is where you can find the petitions for the upcoming executions. What's not up here on the front, but will be soon, is, of course, the Idaho possibility, the request. I'm not sure, and Donna will fill us in. But the request for an Idaho execution would take place on February 28th also. But we've got Ivan Cantu on February 28th, and we just added this one for James Harris in Texas in March. And even prior to that, there's another one. So if you actually click to see all the execution petitions that are set up, and we usually get them going about 6 months in advance, or somewhere in there. So you got 2 on February 28th if they both happen. And it's possible that neither will happen. We'll see. We're going to do our best. And then in March, April, we got 2, Michael Smith and Brian Dorsey, and then nothing until June. All that subject to change. But this is where you can find the petitions, is right here on the page for a death penalty action. So I'll stop that and let's just get right into it. Donna, let me just add you to the conversation here, and welcome and thank you for joining us, Donna, Bo. We've been doing a little bit of work together behind the scenes around trying to win clemency or a clemency recommendation for Thomas Creech. We've been working closely with attorneys in the case. Donna, I'll let you tell us a bit more about what's happening, and we can fill people in and see if there's any questions. So go right ahead, Donna, Bo.
Okay, well, the federal defenders for Tom Creech worked very hard to get testimony from everybody, I think, that knew him, to turn over to the Pardons and Parole Commission with his request for clemency. And they did grant a hearing. However, it's a 7-member body, the commission on parole, and one of the members had recused themselves in advance of that hearing. I don't know the reason why it wasn't made public. So there were 6 members. So the hearing was held. It was not online, so I was not there to witness it. His wife, Leanne, was there, and she said afterwards she went to the ER thinking she was having a heart attack, but it was really an anxiety attack from hearing not only the ones arguing for clemency, but of course the prosecution arguing why he should receive the death penalty. Well, the 6-member commission voted 3 for clemency, 3 for the death penalty. And with a tie vote, it means that the request was denied. So the clemency was denied. Tom has been served with a death warrant. He's been moved to what is called the death cell, where he's within sight of the execution chamber. Even his previous experience before the clemency hearing was watching the guards practice the fatal drug dosage. And that was so traumatic that even when he was put back in his regular cell, he had post-traumatic stress syndrome. It was extremely traumatic to him. But the situation is now, as I understand it, there are a couple of cases before the Idaho Supreme Court. One which says that the law is now that in death penalty cases, you have to have a jury that sentences the death penalty. But I believe under Tom's situation, it was a judge that did it, not a jury. And another law says that the majority of the Pardons and Parole Commission has to recommend clemency or death. In this case, it was a tie vote, so there was no majority. And so I think some of the legal questions hang on those situations, but at present, he's been served the death warrant and is residing in the cell where he awaits execution on the 28th.
So that's thank you for sharing that, and that's important. That litigation that's going forward, especially about the need for a majority. I mean, there's lots of different ways that this could be put off. There's also a request. The governor has the governor actually denied. Do you know, Donna, if the governor denied? We were writing to the governor. Those of us who had signed Tom's petition. We asked everybody to write to the governor and call the governor and ask him to grant a reprieve and see if there's a way to get the commission back together so that there could be a full, we could get that 7th vote. And I haven't heard if the governor has said anything about that or not. What we do know is that he's sort of hankering, just ready to go with execution. So anything further on that, Donna?
I have not heard anything on that.
Okay.
Like you say, when Mr. Pizzuto, the commission had granted clemency, but in a very short time, the governor overruled that and said that he is to be executed. But now there's some legal questions on that. So he is still alive. He hasn't been executed, but he has been sentenced to death, and the governor was part of that.
That's Gerald Pizzuto that you're talking about too, right?
Yes. Sorry, yeah.
And Pizzuto, of course, has a number of illnesses, and we're not sure how long he's going to last. But tell us a bit about Tom. You know him personally. You've been visiting him for years. What can you tell us about Tom Creech as a person?
Well, I only know the Tom Creech of the last 12 years. The Tom Creech that they were talking about and asking for execution and so on, that, as one of the attorneys said, that Tom Creech is no longer here. What we have now is a man in his 70s that has been so nice and respected by the guards and the staff that work there at the prison. I happened to meet him when I was a member of the legislature on the Judiciary Committee and the Criminal Justice Commission. I'm also a member of the Methodist Church, and our bishop is over Oregon and Idaho. Well, Oregon had just voted a moratorium on their death penalty, and so our bishop asked if I could arrange a visit to death row in Idaho. And because I knew the director through the Criminal Justice Commission, I asked him, he granted that permission. I was expecting to do as our Judiciary Committee sometimes does, is visit death row, walk up and down the hall, see the inmates behind their plastic view things, but and that was about it. But instead, we were asked to have a seat there at the table. There were about 8 of us in this delegation, and including the bishop who had flown to Boise in order to do this. And we were seated, and then they brought in Tom Creech. And he was given half an hour or so to sit down and talk to us, to visit with us, to answer questions we had. And I asked the director later, how did you happen to choose Tom Creech to be the one to lead in and meet with us? And he said, because I had a strong feeling that he would be the least likely to come out with some obscene language or provoking kind of language like that. In other words, the director also respected Tom Creech and had faith in him. Well, in the course of our meeting, the bishop asked if it would be all right to hold Tom Creech's hand. Yes, that was all right. Would it be all right to say a prayer? And so, in the bishop's testimony before the Clemency Commission, he said, I felt when I grasped Tom's hand that the spirit was there that said, you are forgiven. And to me, that was really a witness on behalf of Tom, but by the bishop, of such a feeling that of all the wrong he had done, it's been forgiven. And so that was my experience and my husband's experience in meeting Tom Creech. We've kept in touch with him since. It was easier when JPay was working, and haven't heard directly from him very much, but often through his wife, Leanne, who keeps us up to date on what's going on, what his health is like. And he's had some really devastating health problems since we met him. But I guess now he's in at least healthy enough to be led to the death chambers. So that's my experience in getting to know Tom Creech and considering him a friend of ours.
Wow. Well, that's some powerful testimony there. Was he restrained during that visit?
I can't remember if he had handcuffs on when he came in or not, but no, he was not restrained during that. He was sitting in a chair. We were all sitting in a chair around the table.
So the warden or director of prisons, whatever that was, saw that they trusted this guy enough to let him sit in a room together with you all unrestrained.
And we all gave him a hug before he went back. So we felt he was, part of our community.
So, he's been there, over 3 decades. We know that, and by the way, there was a question in the chat from Michael Goodman about, how many executions has there been in Idaho? We know there's been 3 in the current era, but it's been over, a dozen years since the last one?
12 years since the last one.
Okay. So, well, Donna, what are folks in Idaho doing to, what's the group like there? I know people have been COVID messed up the weekly vigils that were happening at the courthouse, and maybe it's time to gather people back together. But what can you tell us about the movement, in Idaho?
Well, I really wished we had an organization as they do in some of the other states. There's one on paper called Idahoans Against the Death Penalty. That's mostly over in the Treasure Valley where Boise is. In eastern Idaho, I know of individuals that oppose it, but there's no organized effort against the death penalty. And whatever might be going on in the Treasure Valley in the Boise area, I haven't heard any direct information on that. So I'm really sorry there doesn't seem to be an organized effort against it at this point. Now, as we approach the 28th, I know there's churches, every church in our Interfaith Alliance here has a position against the death penalty. Now, whether people will act on their church's position on that, I don't know.
Well, we don't know we can to help. And a couple of years ago, it looked like they were going to kill Tom Pizzuto, or Gerald Pizzuto. We sent out a bunch of signs and some T-shirts and all that sort of thing. And there was a gathering of about 20 or 30 people that did a little demonstration. Again, that was in the middle of COVID when people were still kind of sketchy about coming out, doing things. But some of that gear is still there. I just heard from somebody the other day, and we're going to try to connect you with them, and we'll do what we can. But definitely, whenever we've heard about the need for letter writing and all that. You know, the ACLU of Idaho is involved, and the Catholic
Right.
Conference, and the Methodists, and other folks
And
part of
Tom's
that.
spiritual advisor is from the Episcopal Church. And I was so glad to hear that he had a spiritual advisor finally, especially after hearing all that Reverend Hood was able to do in his role, and hearing that Sister Prejean will be assuming that role in another situation. So I hope that that will help Tom while he's there in the death house, so that it doesn't turn out to be the horribly traumatic experience that he had the last time.
Oh boy. Well, thank you, Donna, for bringing this word to us. I'm just showing a picture on the screen here of the petition here. Not sure if we're going to change this up yet, but there is the question. Idaho just last year brought in the firing squad, so there was a question for a few minutes as to whether this would be a firing squad execution, but we're told that they've got the pentobarbital on hand to be able to do a lethal injection, so it's likely to be that, but they do have the firing squad as possible. And this is the petition. Already 43, almost 4,400 people have signed this, and we're going to continue to gather signatures. So that's where that is. And then, yes. Anything further, Donna?
No, can't think of anything at this time. I just hope a lot of people sign that petition and that it has an effect here in Idaho.
We're also going to be, we usually wait till we get a little bit closer to it. And of course, again, there's litigation happening. So hopefully some of that will be successful to continue to push these dates back in Idaho. And whatever y'all need, let us know so we can try to be helpful or round up that help and get it to you. I will say that I was in Idaho. My wife graduated from high school there, so we had her high school reunion this past summer. So I got to see a lot of your beautiful state, and had a few minutes in Boise and all that. And so, I hope to not come back there under these circumstances, but if needed, we certainly will.
I believe those Supreme Court cases are tomorrow morning.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll be paying attention, and we'll hear about it. Well, who knows how soon they'll rule. So thank you very much, Donna.
And thank you.
Us if you can, and we're going to continue to talk about these executions. Here's the next one is the other one that's scheduled to happen that day. And by the way, Donna, what time of day do you think that would be if it does happen? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay. So we don't know what time they're going to do it in Idaho, but at 6 p.m. Central Time on the 28th is the scheduled execution of Ivan Cantu. Now, we've invited people from the Cantu campaign, specifically Ivan's investigator and also his mother, and they were unable to participate tonight. And we will be continuing to lift up them in our prayers and in our work. And I want to highlight for you a lot of what's been going on in that case. There's actually new evidence that is coming out that and there's a whole new web page. I'm going to just show this to you. Here we are again on going back over to Death Penalty Action and click on Ivan Cantu. And there's a little bit of updating that we still need to do to this. The main theme that we all have to be thinking about in this case is Texas about to execute another innocent man? We can't say if Ivan Cantu is innocent, but he's been claiming that all along, and there's a lot of doubt that has to be looked at. And that's why the main question and the main emphasis for our action, that's why our petition is addressed to Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis, as well as the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals and the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles and Governor Greg Abbott. Governor Greg Abbott, somebody in his office actually responded to Julie Bernstein, I think, wrote me back and said that they told her that they're not going to grant clemency in this case already, and I'm still trying to think back if the Board of Pardons and Paroles actually did make their determination last year. I don't think they did. So Ivan had a date last spring, and that was put off. And where it's at now is they've been looking for an evidentiary hearing. So the new things that have been added to this webpage right here is a link to ivancantu.org. Okay, and you can go there, and this is a new action, and there's new information here on this page. So we're linking straight over to this, and if you click to act this on this, it will set you up to sign the move on petition and to contact the district attorney Willis, and these are the questions that we're asking for people to do, to take the actions that you can take. So you want to be looking at that. You want to read the Texas Observer about a question about the article about did he get a fair trial. There's a new updated fact sheet. I'm going to be moving this up a little bit. There's a whole new they just released another edition of the podcast. They're up into the 40 episodes of the podcast Cousins by Blood. So if you click on that, then you get to the Cousins by Blood podcast. I've been listening to it on Spotify. It's all over the place. You can see, yeah, they're up to episode 44. So that's, let me just share with you. Episode 44 is all about the jury foreman. So now three jurors from that case have expressed concern. Do we have the right guy? Did we get the right guy? And again, that's, we can't say for sure because we don't know. Only the only person that really knows is Ivan, right? But what we do know is that there's too much doubt, and that there's a real need for a new evidentiary hearing, if not a new trial. And if you go back to and listen, and I've been doing this actually, and I want to encourage people to do this, go listen to this podcast. Start with episode 1, and it just goes so deep that you're gonna have a lot of questions, as should be the case. And the other thing about this case, let's see, get back to this petition here, is and I'll be switching these up. Let me just point these out to you. There's some short videos that we'll be switching these up to that summarize what are some of the issues in the case. But so that's what's happening in this for this execution. Both of these executions are 3 weeks from Wednesday. This is a picture of Sylvia Cantu, Ivan's mother, from last year when they asked for our help. And we went, a bunch of us went to Texas and did a rally at the courthouse with Sylvia. And then we took her to the state capitol and met with legislators and that sort of thing. So we're ready to do more of that if we're asked to do so. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is a new evidentiary hearing, if not a new trial. And the challenge is that everything is procedurally barred. It's impossible to get new evidence brought in. Last year, there were 4 executions at least of people who had issues that should have been looked at in a court of law and were not because of procedural bars. So just know that's our reality. This is not Ivan's first execution date, and it is, and it could come down to the wire, and it could also be that Sister Helen Prejean, who is his spiritual advisor, came out of the case a couple of months ago, and also just a week or 2 ago, Kim Kardashian started tweeting about this case. Maybe they'll be able to raise up enough attention about this to put the pressure on the governor, and we're going to be doing everything that we can to do that as well. So let me just see if any of our panelists have anything they want to add about the Ivan Cantu case, and if there's any questions, we'll take those too. Put them in the chat, please. Here's Naomi saying it's affirming with me that the podcast is powerfully done, worth listening to. And Gary, go ahead.
It amazes me that Sister Helen's on so many cases and witness to innocence hadn't been around.
Well, you should ask about that at the home office.
I'll definitely do that.
and Sister Ellen just came on, and we'll see what they're going to end up doing. Other questions? How much money will the state get to execute Ivan? Well, I'm not sure what that question means, but you know, I'm not sure what that question means. If you want to elaborate on your question, Barbara, please do. Other questions, other comments? Okay, well, so that's Ivan Cantu. Coming up after that is an execution in these are both the executions that are in February. Then we've got James Harris in Texas. Confess that we just put that one up and don't know a whole lot about it. It's probably, this petition is yep, it's just got the basics. We're still working on getting the information. We try to connect with the attorneys in each case and ask them for their official case narrative. So we're still working to put this information together. I will say that on March 6th is the clemency hearing for the person scheduled after that, Michael Smith. And then, of course, is Brian Dorsey in April as well, Missouri case. And if you look at that, you'll see that we're also still, we need to actually gather the information that they put together over at Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Let me just pop that in here. MADPMO.org. Missourians, it's actually Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty now. And if you get over here, can we put that link in the chat, please, Ali? MADPMO.org. And you can see that Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty have launched their petition, and we'll be bringing some of that information over. But they always run really strong clemency campaigns. Maybe if we can find what they have up here. Here it is, clemency for Brian. They would likely have there was a toolkit launch, and here's the clemency for Brian toolkit that you can check out and see all the different ways that they've put together over at Missourians Against the Death Penalty to help fight for Brian Dorsey. So that's not until April. We'll be talking more about that and have a conversation with our friends from Missourians Against the Death Penalty next month on whatever the first Sunday of March is. We'll be talking about that case and also the case of Michael Smith. Now, Jeff, is there anything you want to say about Michael Smith?
We're working hard, trying to get him ready to fight for clemency. There's a variety of legal petitions still percolating. And Michael's a good guy, has become a good friend. I've been working with him for probably 13 or 14 months now. And anyways, very thankful for his presence in my life. And I think that it's important to understand that Michael is yet another situation where it seems like the system, all facets of the system have failed him, in that he doesn't feel like he's gotten the chance to put his evidence before the courts. He doesn't feel like he's gotten the chance to engage various experts in ways that he would like. And he now feels like he's getting to the end of his struggle and still hasn't been able to do such things. So I think right now he is, working with his attorney, Mark Hendrickson, in Oklahoma City, and feels fairly good about the filings that they currently are making. And hopefully Michael will not see an execution date. But if he does, again, he is one of my guys, and I will be there with him all the way. So, prayers for him.
Oh, thank you for that, Jeff. I see the question still going about the cost of executions. there's a set amount well, not a set amount, but a fair amount. We saw this in Alabama, just the amount of extra security that comes in and out of extra time and out of extra expense that states go through, depending on the case. So those are the upcoming executions. We also wanted to have a conversation today about what's coming up in some of the issues around execution methods. And to that end, we've got some, I think I saw that Hillary has joined us from South Carolina, and Christy is here from Nebraska, and I'm here from Ohio. And we want to talk a little bit about these attempts to add in different methods of execution. Jeff, can we get you back on just to just give us a brief, experience having witnessed it, the first execution by suffocation with nitrogen gas in the history of this country. And we'll put up a couple of links to some of the things that have been written in there, but about that. But Jeff, you were there. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about it all night, but I think probably the most important thing for people to hear is that it was nothing like the state said was going to happen or since has said happened. What we've received is a very sanitized version of what took place. And there's no doubt that they were doing everything they could to facilitate any sort of religious liberty concerns before the execution. And they were doing that because they were desperate to make this happen. I have rarely seen a state that wants to accommodate so many different religious liberty concerns. I mean, that's been one of the few ways to push back and stop these executions in recent years. And again, they were willing to facilitate just about everything, it felt like. With that said, I got a really beautiful opportunity to spend time with Kenny before, and got a chance to just share some beautiful moments. I'll say this really quick, just a quick aside for everybody to get a good laugh out of it. We were reading through the Gospel of John and the story of the adulterous woman, and we got to this space where Jesus is there with the woman caught in adultery, and is there in the dirt with her. And there's that very famous passage, "You who are without sin, cast the first stone." Well, I read that, and Kenny rises up and looks at all of the execution squad and says, "He's talking to you, right?" And it was a really beautiful moment of kind of pushing back against the system, and using so much of what these guys profess to believe in order to do it. With that said, the execution itself was it was absolutely horrific. We were told that he was going to be unconscious in seconds and dead within a few short minutes. Anybody that's read these accounts knows that not just he wasn't unconscious in seconds or executed dead in minutes. The execution lasted 22 minutes. And Kenny, for at least 2 to 3 minutes, I would venture to say longer, convulsed on the table. He very much looked like a fish out of water, slamming his head up and down, up and down, up and down. His face was pushing up against the front of the mask. There was mucus, saliva, other things coming out of his mouth that were slamming up against the front of the mask, that were drizzling down as the execution was proceeding. One of the nightmares that keeps coming to me or revisiting me is it looked like his head was going to pop off. It looked like his head was going to explode and go through the ceiling. And that's how much strain his body was under. I think it's also important to point out that his face changed a variety of colors, from white to red to blue. And one of the things that was consistently not said in the lead up to this was just what would happen if he wasn't, if he didn't go unconscious immediately. And you know, I mean, I could go on to more graphic details, but I'll just say it like this: nobody, including the guards, me, the witnesses, nobody was prepared for what they saw, which is one of the reasons why you're still seeing reports coming out about how horrific it was, because there's a lot of, I think now we're getting to the second round of people who might have been afraid to come out to begin with, because, you know, perhaps they were afraid it might affect their job or their standing or whatever, are now coming out with these more intense descriptions. But I I think the best way that I can describe it is it was something that I never could have imagined that human beings would be capable of doing it to each other. It was torture, and it was um, you know, I guess it's probably also important to situate what I'm saying in that I was a trauma chaplain for about a year and a half, so I've seen, you know, motorcycle wrecks, airplane crashes, gunfire, burning, like, you know, pretty horrible ways to die and to be hurt. A number of years ago, I was involved in a protest in Dallas where 5 police officers were killed. I was about 40 feet from them, um, which was, and again, another horrible circumstance. 4 executions this past year that I've been with guys at. And I can tell you that what I saw last week was the worst thing that I have ever seen. And I think the main reason for that is because it put so much strain on his body that I was waiting on various parts of him to just explode, to just combust. And that didn't, I mean, obviously he died, but it just was, yeah, it just was a nightmare scenario. I'll say this as well. I talked to Dee, Kenny's wife, like 30 minutes before I came on here, 45 minutes, and she continues to struggle, and as does the rest of his family. So it's important to remember that in these circumstances, it's not just um, the people who are in the room, the witnesses from the state, the media who see these things. I mean, his family, his wife, his son will have to live with this for the rest of their lives. And I can't imagine any politician, any judge, any governor that saw what I saw would think that this is an appropriate thing to ever happen again.
Thank you, Jeff. And yet, there's a proposal. I mean, that happened on a Thursday, a week ago. This past Thursday was a week, and then the following Monday, a week ago from tomorrow, the Attorney General of Ohio came out with a proposal, legislation to bring gas executions to Ohio. And in Nebraska in December, they introduced legislation there. And I want to have Christy come on in a moment. But first, if Hillary is still here, you know, there's other things that they're trying too. So in South Carolina, they've introduced firing squads and added that to the possibility of lethal injections and electric chair executions. And on Tuesday morning, there's going to be a continued Supreme Court debate in South Carolina. So, Hillary, are you here? Can you join us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for inviting me.
Here we go. So this is Reverend Hillary Taylor, the Executive Director of South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And Hillary, fill us in. What's happening in South Carolina?
Yeah, so let me give you a quick kind of backstory for those of you who haven't been keeping up. South Carolina had created the firing squad as a means of execution in 2021. It's actually what restarted our organization. They finally had the firing squad up and running, or able to be running, in 2022. And what the lawyers of 4 folks on South Carolina's death row did is they filed a petition saying that the firing squad and the electric chair are cruel and corporal and unusual methods of execution per the South Carolina Constitution. In early 2023, there was a oral arguments around this particular court case. The Supreme Court of South Carolina sent the court case back to the circuit court, which did rule that the electric chair and the firing squad were cruel and corporal and unusual. The main reason they sent it back to the circuit court was because there was not enough discovery around what the state of South Carolina had done to get lethal injection drugs. The state of South Carolina's supply of lethal injection drugs expired in 2013, and they had not been able to pass a lethal injection secrecy law, for about a decade. Unfortunately, last year they did file, and they were able to pass a lethal injection secrecy law. That passed in May, and what we know is that over the next 4 to 5 months, the state of South Carolina made over 1,300 contacts trying to buy lethal injection drugs. They were able to successfully do it. They put out a press release in September of last year. And then the state, upon, saying we have the drugs, they tried to move to dismiss this court case around the constitutionality of the firing squad and the electric chair, saying we have the lethal injection drugs. It doesn't matter what this ruling is, because we can start executing people. So let's just go ahead and start executing people. The state Supreme Court here in South Carolina said, no, we're still going to litigate this case, and there will be oral arguments on February 6th of 2024. So that's this Tuesday. So that is what is going to happen this Tuesday. We're going to continue to hear oral arguments about this case, about the constitutionality of the firing squad and the electric chair. Now that the state has lethal injection drugs, there's still some questions that need to be answered. Like, is this really even pentobarbital that you have? Do you know if it's the correct dosage? There's some things, basic questions that the lawyers for the guys here on death row have that should be answered. And so it's going to be an interesting time. I'm not sure what we're going to find out, but I'm going to be there. And Abe, I don't know if you have this petition up yet, but we would love for you to join us. We have a kind of email petition, an event where you can sign up and receive the link to watch it. It will be broadcast at 9:30 a.m. on this Tuesday, February 6th. We look forward to you watching it with us. I will be there live. We would have, kind of a big, invite there. Unfortunately, our state Supreme Court house is very small, so it's better if everybody watches online. And then once we watch online, we'll be able to figure out how to mobilize from there. So happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
So I put a link to that. Where people can sign up to join your viewing party. I imagine that if somehow something goes wrong with that, you can also just find it on the Supreme Court of South Carolina, live stream on their webpage somehow. So, but hopefully people will be able to join the SCHP viewing party being probably not the best word, but the event, and we'll see what happens there. If the Supreme Court ultimately rules to allow the resumption of executions because in South Carolina, we know they have to have 2 viable methods of execution. So that's what has to happen is they have to decide that either the firing squad or either they have the drugs or they have 2 other viable methods, firing squad, electric chair. What happens if they decide they can go ahead? And I see Alex comments too.
Yeah. At this point, there's kind of 3 things. The state Supreme Court really doesn't want to rule on this. We kind of saw that last year when they kicked it back to the circuit court and hoped that the circuit court would fix it for them. The state, unfortunately, took matters into their own hands and said it's easier for us to pass a lethal injection secrecy bill than to litigate this discovery process. So the state Supreme Court could kick the can down the road somehow. They could rule in our favor as a movement, right, and strike down the firing squad and the electric chair. At which case, there's two alternatives, right? There's they could change the state constitution to say that lethal injection is the only constitutional method of execution that we will have. Or they could add another potential way to execute people like nitrogen hypoxia. And so that is something that we are preparing for. We know that other states right now are seeing some of those bills come into fruition. And so we have not heard any word that there will be such a bill adding nitrogen hypoxia as a method of execution here in South Carolina, but we are prepared for that if it happens. The final thing is that they could say, you know what, we're going to let executions resume here in South Carolina, and we're just going to go ahead and say that the state can do that. And so we are also prepared for that. We've been making toolkits and trying to get kind of boots on the ground, mobilizing with different folks and different partners all across South Carolina with all kinds of sociopolitical ideologies, ideological backgrounds. So know that there are ways that you can plug in if you are in South Carolina, or if you're outside of South Carolina looking to support that work. Know that that is possible too.
I'm putting the URL scadp.org. Allie, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just really hope that South Carolina passing that law that makes it so that they have to have two viable methods of execution really bites them in the butt, because if the Supreme Court, fingers crossed, knocks down and says that these two methods, firing squad and electric chair, are unconstitutional, South Carolina passed that law so that they could resume executions, and now that law is hindering them from resuming executions. So I really hope that that is the case. But after the oral arguments on Tuesday, I know this process has been playing out for a couple years now. How long or how quickly do you anticipate them ruling one way or the other once these oral arguments take place?
Oral arguments, it's usually about 30 days after oral arguments that happen both with the circuit court and also, I believe, with the Supreme Court. So that's what you can look at is after about a month. So you can think of maybe the first or second week in March. That's what I would look towards.
Okay, so possibilities can go in many different directions. Christy, you still here with us?
Yep, I am.
Okay, so Christy Hargensheimer is with us from Nebraskans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty and Amnesty International, and can share with us a little bit about what's happening in Nebraska. They're trying to bring in the gas chamber as a possible execution method too. So what do you got, Christy?
Well, you might remember that a month ago, I mentioned that a bill had been proposed in our legislature on, it was January 4th, the first day, by a senator named Lippincott, who was proposing the use of nitrogen hypoxia. And this was 3 weeks before Kenny Smith's execution. He said that he was given information by one of his constituents about it, and he thought he'd studied about it, and it was a good idea because, well, he didn't have any real information about how it would be, but he said it's a very humane way of putting a person to sleep. And it would, despite what the United Nations said, that it would result in a painful and humiliating death for prisoners, he thought that was totally bogus. And he said that when he was a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, he experienced symptoms of hypoxia during a training in which he was in an altitude chamber and deprived of oxygen while under supervision. He said the effects made him feel sleepy and warm, but it was painless. And so obviously he did not have the experience that Reverend Hood had to go through. It's totally, he said, going to sleep via nitrogen is painless. It's a very humane way to do it. And obviously, when he submitted this bill, that went into the Judiciary Committee, and I'm going to be reading a little bit from something that was prepared by our staff person from Nebraska for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, who couldn't be with us tonight.
Christy, if I could interrupt you, for a lot of people are reporting that it's hard to hear you.
Oh,
So maybe
if you lift whatever device you're working from, maybe the mic is getting muffled because it's touching the table.
I just raised it a little bit. Does that help?
It's a
yes.
little better.
Okay, well, and I'll just talk loudly. What I was saying was that the senator who brought this bill to the legislature early in January said it was just, you know, a calm and peaceful way to go to sleep. And our NADP staff person who couldn't be with us tonight wrote a little history about this bill, and he said that as with most death penalty states, our only protocol on the books is lethal injection. When the bill was introduced, many abolition advocates have conjectured that the main motivation behind that push is driven by frustration at pharmaceutical companies' unwillingness to see their products used to kill somebody. And during the evening news interview a week ago, the Senator Lippincott, who introduced this bill, kind of confirmed that this was the reason. And I might add that he said that they had already identified who the first person is that they would try this out on, which is a little bit frightening. Now, well, very frightening. Now, this bill is still in committee and it hasn't been scheduled yet for a hearing. And since this is the 60-day session of our legislature, we're in the 20th day tomorrow. So it's not really maybe likely to get out of committee, except that there are 17 co-sponsors of the bill. And in our state, we only have 49 people in the legislature. So you need 25 of them, a simple majority, to advance a bill, using what is called a pull motion. And that is that if 25 people vote to subvert the process of the committee, they can pull any motion out and debate it on the floor of the legislature. So we're hoping that doesn't happen. The committee itself, the Judiciary Committee, is not likely to want to advance it. And I want to say something about the drugs that were used. We've only had one execution, well, in 1997 we had one, and then not another one until 2018. And because of the shortage of drugs, the impossibility of getting them, our state used fentanyl as part of a group of drugs. And this was the first time I think fentanyl has been used in an execution in the United States. And I think other states now have tried it too. So since what we're hoping is that there is so much that needs to be done that's really priority issues in the state of Nebraska, and there are less than 40 days left. It's not maybe not going to, they don't want to waste their time on a bill that isn't really anybody's priority issue. There is one other bill, it's a resolution to place a question on the November 2024 ballot, asking voters to prohibit the death penalty in Nebraska. And our history is that in 2015, the legislature abolished the death penalty. The governor at the time vetoed it. The legislature overrode the veto. And instead of carrying out, which is his definition of his job, the governor is to carry out the bills passed by the legislature. Instead, he poured his money into a petition process, and they put it to the vote of the people of Nebraska who had not been educated on the issue, and they voted to reinstate the death penalty. So we have it again, but we have only used it in 2018. What we're hoping is that people will be able to contact their legislators and argue against this, give some good reasons now that we have the experience of somebody having undergone this process. I'm hoping that people will be more humane. And so if any of you know people in Nebraska, you can please contact them and ask them to reach out. If they've never engaged in this kind of process before of contacting their legislators, you can send an email or direct them to our NADP at Alex, ALEX, at NADP.net. And he will help walk them through the process. And there's a website too. I did want to mention one other thing. I have just read a chapter about the death penalty in this book, Allow Me to Retort, by Elie Miscal. And the name of the chapter is It's Not Unusual to Be Cruel. And I mean, you know, that's a horrifying thought too. But in the article, he talks about the opinion of Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch in, I think it was 2019, in the case of Buckley. And he wrote in his opinion, the Eighth Amendment forbids cruel and unusual methods of capital punishment, but it does not guarantee a prisoner a painless death. So there, you know, I like to believe in the goodness of people, but Elie Miscal doesn't share that view, apparently. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to know about this. We had kind of a spotty history in Nebraska. We don't have a large death row, about 11 or maybe 12 now people, but very few executions, 4 in the past 30 years. So that's my report.
Thank you so much, Christy. Let me show, this is the web page for Nebraskans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. I put a link in the chat so people can find that. You know, you can look at this report they did on the cost of the death penalty. You can see some of the other activities that y'all have done there. So we're grateful for you coming on tonight and making the time to share with us, and also for your good work there. And we're all with you to you know, keep up the fight, and let's stop that bill.
All right, thank you.
I didn't see any questions for in the chat here, so and I'll put the there it is. We've got it's NADP, Nebraskans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, NADP.net, because somebody else had .org, so you got to get the .net there. So so that's that. We have I'll just share with you, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost running for governor. So therefore, they two things happened, in my opinion, when they came out with this proposed legislation to bring gas executions to Ohio. Number one, you should know we haven't had any executions in Ohio in more than 5 years now under the Governor Mike DeWine, who, as Attorney General, did everything he could to advance executions. But as governor, He's done everything he needed to do to not allow them to go forward. And nevertheless, we've got the Attorney General. He has not actually formally declared for governor yet, but this is a step, right? So he's proposing gas chamber executions. We'll see what happens. And of course, a bunch of legislators and the head of the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association held a press conference a week ago. Tuesday will be a week to recommend this and to echo what they heard from the government in Alabama, that gas executions are just fine. And I will tell you that we are organizing against that in Ohio. No committee hearing has been set yet. So when there is one, we'll be ready to push back and push back hard. Because, of course, why do we need to be talking about how we're going to kill our prisoners when we're also talking about abolishing the death penalty in Ohio? And there is viable legislation to abolish the death penalty in Ohio. So that's kind of the next thing that's going on there. So with that, Jeff is clarifying that nitrogen hypoxia is not a gas mask, not the gas chamber, but it's gas executions using gas to replace oxygen and suffocating a prisoner, which is also what happens what could happen in a gas chamber, depending on what gas you're using. Because I would, if you go to our gas chamber petition, we're using those words to reference gas executions. But if you go to the petition, no death penalty, about the gas chamber and nitrogen gas executions, you can find a link to two things. One, the protocol for cyanide gas executions, and there's only one state that's actively got that on the books, which is Arizona. And the other thing that there's a link to there is the affidavit of people who witnessed some of the recent, some of the last gas chamber executions that took place in Arizona. And I will note, a couple of years ago now, Arizona resumed executions, and some of us were there protesting outside, and we went to lunch after the execution was over. The execution was in the morning. And when we got there, there was a woman sitting there, and she just overheard when I asked how long it was going to be. They said it was going to be half an hour. I said, "Oh, we'll go eat somewhere else." And this woman said, "Hey, stay. It'll be worth your while." So we did stay, and we ate, and it was delicious. And she came over to talk with us afterwards. Obviously, she saw our T-shirts, very clearly who we are. And she said, "So was there an execution today?" And we said, "Yes." And she said, "Was it gas chamber or lethal injection?" And it was lethal injection. And she seemed relieved by that. And then she shared with us that she was a former corrections officer. She actually came all the way there to eat at that restaurant because she liked it and she used to eat there when she worked. But she shared that she was a corrections officer posted in the guard tower above the execution chamber. And for 6 lethal injections, it was no big deal. She was there, no big deal. But for the one gas chamber execution that happened while she was there, Walter LeGrand, I think that was in 1999, she said that she had to wear a gas mask, and she can still remember the screams of the prisoner being executed. And the next day, she shared with us that she went and asked for a transfer to a different prison so she wouldn't have to endure that again. And here it was 2 decades, 3 decades later, 2 decades later, that she could still hear those screams, and she shared that with us. And that's what we know based on what Jeff described. We're putting state workers, not alone the witnesses from the media, the families involved. If you read that New York Times article, that came out on Friday, it contains various perspectives from the victim family, from Jeff, from media witnesses, about what they saw and the nightmares all those people are going to be enduring for the rest of their lives, probably. Jeff has shared a little bit about that. And Jeff, I did mean to also say that a lot of people are asking how you're doing and praying for you and the trauma that you're enduring as you stand with these prisoners in their final moments. So Is there anything else? We wanted to make sure to check back in. We just remove the spotlight here and just invite further comments and questions from anybody else in the gallery here. That's any further thoughts? I want to invite Gary Drinker to also share a bit about his perspective with what happened in Alabama, and also, well, Gary, you've got the floor here. You got to unmute.
All right. First of all, I like to commend Jeff. Ain't no way I could sit in there and watch a person die like that. I mean, it would give him nightmares just to think about it. I mean, I sit in here cried the last couple of nights thinking about Kenny because he had changed. Uh, People do change, and I'm sure you know it as well. Anybody that's well, the lady before said that she'd experienced a man that changed.
Hey,
I don't
yeah,
understand how these legislators and senators can pass a bill so quickly about, having to have two drugs, or you got to choose a drug if one's not available. In Alabama, if at that time it was electric chair when I was in there, and they were just coming out with the drugs, and they said if you didn't want the electric chair, then you could choose on to lay on the gurney, and they had a couple of botched executions with the electric chair, so people they were getting afraid of it, and choosing the drugs. But it doesn't matter how you die, you're going to die one way or the other. To me, the quickest way to kill somebody would be with a lethal drug like the fentanyl, but I heard the fentanyl didn't go that well. Or even with a guillotine. I mean, that's instant death. What I experienced in Alabama with Kenny, it just saddens me. These people are so I can't think of the word. They just want to kill somebody. I mean, after they've had somebody in there. I know if somebody had a chance, I wish I'd have had a chance to talk to the Senate brothers. I believe I could have changed their minds about a couple of things. But I heard them say that they were glad it was over. Well, if they'd killed Kenny life without parole, that would have been over. They wouldn't have had a thought about it no more. That's why people are the victims' families, to me, really want it, no matter how, just to be over. If they'd have given Kenny life without parole, they'd have never had to think about it again. And I believe they'd have changed their minds on wanting to see the death. And I believe they've had some disturbing thoughts afterwards.
Yeah, Gary, I want to apologize because we didn't really properly introduce you. You're an exonerated death row survivor from Alabama. You did what, 8 years, was it, that you
8
were
years
incarcerated?
altogether, a little over 5 on death row.
And you knew Kenny Smith while you were on death row.
Yeah, we were good friends. I mean, he was a good guy. He was a good guy. I always had that big smile on his face.
All right, well, I just want to
Always
make sure
trying
there
to
was,
help anybody he could,
yeah, I wanted to make sure everybody was clear who you were, and you did a number of events that week of the execution around Alabama with us to help educate people about the death penalty, and we wanted to give you a chance to share any reflections you have, which you've been doing. So I just want to make sure everybody knew who you were before we.
All right, thank you.
Abe, I wanted to jump in really quick and just say how thankful I am for Gary and folks like him who, I know unfortunately, there's some people who, go through, similar things to what you went through, Gary, who never speak out. They just want to forget everything and they don't want to engage. And I guess that certainly that response is understandable. But I think there's something incredibly powerful about folks like yourself who go through such horror and share your story. I know that as I've heard your story throughout the last week or so, and certainly before that too. But you're just an incredibly powerful guy, Gary, and I'm just very thankful for your presence, standing with us last week, continuing to stand with us, and folks who have been through what you've been through, who continue the fight.
Hey, brother, I'm just a dumb old country boy helping out any way I can.
So, Gary, did you get any compensation when you got out?
No, Alabama's not going to give you nothing. Hard kick in the rear.
A hard kick in the rear. Well, you had another hard kick in the rear after you were, driving home from we did. We were up in Atmore, and it was raining a lot, so we had a space in a hotel nearby, and we did a press conference there, and we did our live virtual vigil. Many of you might have been watching that, and then we slept, and we got up in the morning, and Gary had a little accident on the way home, and wrecked his car, and we've been, and as a person that pretty much you're on what, state assistance? How are you making your earning your living, Gary?
I'm on Social Security.
So you don't have a lot of money, is what it is,
No.
right? So I want to
Day
share.
to day.
So Gary ended up totaling the car he was driving, and I just wanted to give a moment to share. We created a GoFundMe just a week ago on Friday. Already we've raised over nearly $7,000 to help you replace your car, Gary. And I'll take a look there at there's the state trooper checking him out and gave him an all clear.
He's got the same hat on.
Yes, he does. So there it is. We put a link to this in the chat also, and I want to invite anybody that is able to, because Gary doesn't have a large income. He's needs to replace that vehicle. So if you're in a position to help, there's the link to the GoFundMe that we set up for Gary. And Gary, I wanted to just give you a chance to say anything more about that if you wish.
Oh yeah, Abe. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I had never been treated this good by so many people. All those people have been donating to me. I mean, get my ex-wife off my back.
So that wasn't even your car; it was her car.
Yeah, I got to replace her car. She has found her a car. It's a Buick Century 2004, I think, 96,000 miles. She's tickled with it, and her husband's tickled with it. It's the main thing.
Okay, mainly because you borrowed her car because your car wouldn't have made the trip, right?
No, my car wouldn't have made it. I got one that'll just make it around here a little bit, but no, I couldn't drove that far at mine.
Okay, well, hopefully we're going to raise enough money to make sure that you can replace your vehicle and her vehicle, and have hopefully a little bit of extra to just take care of whatever needs you have, because it's been a long time since you got out, but you're still you're retired, and just living life in the way that you are. So we're all
Every day's a good
for you,
day.
and we want to be able to support you if we can.
Every day's a good day.
All right, so everybody, if you can put in just $5 or $10 or $500 or whatever it is possible to help Gary, that would be tremendous, and we'd appreciate it. For the good of the record, is there anything else we needed to address tonight before we close it out?
I'm bummed that Mitzi already left, but I know these 2 executions are still kind of up in the air in Mississippi. The state said that they were trying to pursue these 2 execution dates back before the end of the year. And in Mississippi, what's worrisome is they only have to give you a 24-hour notice before they execute you. So we do have 2 petitions for Willie Manning and Robert Simon in Mississippi. Please sign those. These execution dates could pop up at any moment. I'm thoroughly surprised they haven't popped up yet, because they we're hoping to get those done before the end of the year, but they haven't happened yet. So asking for folks to sign those petitions.
All right, and I'll put the link again to the general petitions page. And that is where, if you scroll down a bit, you'll find those petitions where we think they're going to be setting dates and they haven't done so yet. So with that, I'm going to just go back over and I want to thank all of our participants tonight. I want to thank everybody who's engaging with us and supporting death penalty action and supporting all the other groups that are working on this project Hope to Abolish the Death Penalty, and Nebraskans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, and South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, and the Idaho folks, and the Texas folks, and everybody that's doing this work, and Ohioans to stop executions, et cetera, et cetera. We all need to do whatever we can to lift these groups up, to let people know about them. And also I want to mention, there's bills to try to reinstate the death penalty going on right now in West Virginia and in Iowa, states that have not had a death penalty in the current era. And by current era, we mean since the Furman's decision in 1972 struck down all the death penalty laws. So in the current era, West Virginia and Iowa have not had a death penalty, and now they're trying to bring it in. And the folks in those states are fighting that. And if you know anybody there, tell them we call their legislators, ask them to not allow that bill to go forward. So finally, I will just go back here and share again the Death Penalty Action webpage. If you get to the front page and scroll down, here we are, moving slow tonight. Come on. There we go. You get past the petitions. Here's the federal stuff. You can write to your members of Congress and to the president, please do. And then you get over to here. Here's where that gas chamber petition is. We've got that set up so that it can apply no matter to whichever state this is happening. We can apply these signatures to that. There's also Yuri Kadama's petition and campaign to stop the solitary confinement on federal death row. You can look into that. But I want to share this again. This is a tool, and I've just recently heard from somebody that's been using these to foster conversation in their church. The People versus the Death Penalty series, these short 5-minute vignettes with people who have different voices of experience on the death penalty. And tonight, given the conversation that we had, I want to share the voice of Ron McAndrew on our way out tonight. So this is where you find it, is on the People versus the Death Penalty film series. And these are great tools to just show the video and then have a conversation in your church study group or in your class or just with friends. These are tools that are available to you. I'll just note, you got a couple of death row survivors here. You got the brothers of Rodney Reed and of Kevin Keith. You've also got a great piece on the human rights aspect of it from Professor Rick Halpern, and of course Lisa Brown, the mother of Christopher Villalba, who was executed by the federal government. But we'll take it out tonight with the voice of Ron McAndrew.
I grew up on a small farm. There was a lot of Bible reading in front of the fireplace in the evenings. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was often used not just as a quote from the Bible, but it was an expression that we should use and believe in. And I did. I grew up supporting the death penalty simply because I thought it was the right thing. That's what I was told. That's what I believed. I was starting to have a mental anguish, trouble sleeping, drinking huge amounts of alcohol, try and numb the stress. There was a point after I left Florida State Prison that these men would come and sit on the edge of my bed at night. I told my wife that I was being haunted by the men that I had actually helped leave this world. The black skin, once you've electrocuted someone, gets an ash color to it. And they still had that color on their faces when they would sit on my bed. I could see them. They'd just look at me, you know. Pedro Medina will always be paramount in my mind, and when I think about these things.
Is he one of the ghosts?
He's one of the ghosts. Yeah. When I gave the signal to the executioner, it was a pop. And if you've ever done a light switch or something and there was a pop, you know instantly that something's wrong with the electricity. And within a few seconds, the smoke and fire came out from underneath that copper helmet. In fact, came right up in front of my face because I stand about 3 feet away from the electric chair. And it just kept smoking, and the smoke got blacker and blacker and blacker. And the electrician, who's wearing these big lineman gloves, had his hands ready to take the helmet off of his head, and he looked at me and said, "Continue, continue." There was no way we could stop at that point. I said, "Absolutely, continue." And the room filled with smoke. I ordered the colonel to open the window to let the smoke out. The smoke went upstairs where all the inmates on death row could smell burning flesh. I had it all over my body. I threw my clothes away that day. I couldn't scrub hard enough to get the smell off of me. Everybody in the room, the colonel, sergeant that's on the phone with the governor, we were all covered with this mess. And it was a bad day. The wriggling of his body, his arms trying to grip the table, and his heaving of his chest. I believe that he knew he was being burned to death. And I really don't want that feeling to go away. I want to remember that until my last breath. I want to remember it so I can tell it to people like you and to anybody else who will stand in front of me long enough to hear it. A premeditated ceremonial political killing, that's what I call it. This is much less than what we should be as Americans. Much less.
When they had the electric chair going on in Alabama, a lot of times you could smell the flesh burning.